The first sound was the brittle snap of a twig, sharp, out of place, impossible to ignore on a ranch where every path had its rhythm. Elijah Cade froze mid-step, the feed pail swinging slightly from his hand. He knew the noises of the high plains, restless wind, lowing cattle, the faint drag of brush across sand. This wasn't any of those. He lifted the lantern. Its circle of amber light trembled over the barn's wooden ribs, and that's when he saw it. A figure crouched behind the hay bales, arms tight around a burlap sack, eyes wide and raw with fear. "Don't come closer," the figure warned, voice cracking but steady enough to mean it. Elijah didn't move. "You're on private land," he said evenly. "If you needed shelter, you could have knocked. I didn't think you'd open the door." Something in the voice landed strangely, not desperate, but defeated, as if expecting to be turned away. Elijah set the lantern on a beam, raising both hands in plain view. "What's in the sack?" he asked. "Tools," the figure said. "I'm not here to steal stock. I just needed a place to stay the night." Elijah studied the stranger more closely. Dust streaked the coat, one sleeve torn, boots nearly falling apart. The person looked no older than 16, maybe 17, and carried the exhaustion of someone who'd walked farther than their strength allowed. "Name?" Elijah asked. The stranger swallowed. "Marin." No last name offered. No explanation. "No," the sheriff admitted, shifting. "But folks want answers. A trail of missing goods leads here." Elijah didn't respond immediately. He looked past the riders toward the empty horizon, fading moon, rising sun, long miles of grassland. Out there were towns that crushed people for a single mistake. Out there were men who punished more for appearances than truth. "Got livestock," Elijah finally said. "I can't have strangers stirring them up. If the kid comes by, I'll let you know." It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. When the riders left, their hoofbeats trailing into the distance, Elijah returned inside. Marin sat at the table, sack at their feet, face pale. "You heard," Elijah said. Marin nodded. "You steal those tools?" A long silence. Then Marin whispered, "I took them, but not to sell. I'm building something. Somewhere safe to stay. Didn't think anyone would miss a few nails." "Folks always miss what they think is theirs," Elijah said. Marin's fists tightened around the sack. "If they take me back, they won't listen." "Why not?" Another silence, heavier, layered. "They think I'm trouble because of how I look," Marin said finally. "Not who I am." Before Elijah could reply, a sound drifted from outside, hoofbeats again, but more this time. Faster. Urgent. The riders were coming back. And this time, they weren't alone, the rumble of approaching horses grew sharper, more organized. Elijah moved quietly to the window. Beyond the cottonwoods, 7 riders pushed through the dust, sheriff in front, but now flanked by townsmen with rifles slung low. "Looks like Mule Creek brought company," Elijah muttered. Marin stood motionless. "They'll take me." Elijah turned. "Only if we let them." Marin shook their head. "You don't even know what they're saying about me." He didn't need to. The size of the posse already told the story. People didn't ride out in numbers for stolen nails, they rode because they wanted a culprit to blame for whatever trouble haunted their town. A sharp whistle cut the air as the posse reached the front gate. Men dismounted, spreading out like a tightening net. The sheriff called loudly, "Cade. We need to talk." Elijah stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "You brought half the county," he said dryly. "A rancher out near Thompson's Creek claims the same kid broke into his shed last week," the sheriff replied. "We can't risk more trouble." Elijah studied the men, faces tight with suspicion, hands too close to weapons for a simple talk. These weren't people looking for justice. They were looking for control. What if the kid didn't mean harm? Elijah asked. That ain't your call, a townsman snapped. A thief's a thief. Elijah's jaw tightened. Not always. Sometimes a thief's just someone townsfolk ran out before hearing a word of truth. The sheriff's gaze hardened. Where is the kid, Elijah? Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he asked, if the kid steps out, do you promise no one here will raise a gun? A few men scoffed. Others muttered. No one made that promise. Inside the house, Marin listened to the murmur of angry voices. Their breath hitched. They weren't afraid of the sheriff. They were afraid of the stories being believed without question. Elijah returned to the doorway and motioned for Marin. Come to the porch, he said quietly. Let me stand between you and whatever lies they're carrying. Marin stepped out slowly, shoulders squared even though fear rippled beneath their calm. A ripple moved through the posse, disapproval, judgment, whispered comments about clothing, hair, posture. There, the deputy said. Knew it. Doesn't even look right. Troublemaker if I ever saw one. The sheriff raised his hand. Marin, you're coming with us. Marin didn't flinch. Will you listen to me explain first? That depends, the sheriff said. Truth better come quick. Elijah stepped between them, refusing to move. You'll listen, he said. Or you'll deal with me first. Rifles shifted. The standoff locked into place. Elijah raised his hand slightly, not in surrender, but in a gesture meant to cool the heat simmering between both sides. Everyone take a breath, he said. Let's start with questions, not guns. The sheriff hesitated. Elijah Cade wasn't a man you dismissed lightly. Steady, respected, stubborn as bedrock. If he demanded truth, folks usually stayed long enough to hear it. All right, the sheriff said finally. Talk. Elijah nodded to Marin. Start with why you left Mule Creek. Marin swallowed. Because I didn't fit in. A scoff rose from one of the townsmen. That's it? Not a crime. Marin continued. I tried to work honest jobs. They didn't want me. Said I didn't look the part. Said folks like me caused confusion. Elijah watched the faces of the posse shift, confusion for some, resentment for others. Marin's voice steadied. I wasn't sneaking into tool sheds to cause trouble. I was building a shelter out near the ridge. A place where I wouldn't bother anyone. A roof. A wall. A stove made from scrap. That's all. The sheriff looked at the sack. And those tools? I borrowed them, Marin said. Meant to return everything once I finished. Elijah gently asked, why didn't you ask anyone for help? Marin's throat tightened. Because every time I did, people looked at me like I wasn't right. Like something was wrong with me. Like they couldn't decide what I was or where I belonged. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Elijah could feel the shift, not dramatic, not sudden, but real. The truth wasn't pretty, but it was honest. And honesty always left a mark. You judged on what you saw, Elijah told the posse quietly. Not on who this kid is. A few men lowered their eyes. One didn't. We still got laws, the deputy muttered. We do, Elijah agreed. But laws don't forbid compassion. Or common sense. The sheriff let out a long breath. Marin, if you talked to someone, we could have sorted this before it turned into a chase. No one listens to someone like me, Marin said softly. Not until now. The wind shifted, carrying with it the sharp scent of distant rain. The sky bruised at the edges, storm rolling in fast. Elijah glanced from Marin to the sheriff. We can keep fighting, he said, or we can fix what's broken. The sheriff looked at the swelling clouds, then at Marin's tired face. We fix it, he said. But before the peace could settle, a single shout erupted from the edge of the group. Look out! Lightning cracked behind the ridge. Smoke. Flame. A wildfire had sparked, and it was racing straight toward Elijah's ranch. Hope and danger collided at once. The wildfire moved like a living thing, hissing through dry grass, climbing fence posts, throwing sparks across the field. Elijah didn't waste a second. "Grab buckets. Form a line to the well," he shouted. The posse scattered into motion. Whatever argument existed minutes ago was gone, swallowed by the urgent clarity of disaster. Marin stood frozen until Elijah gripped their shoulder. "You wanted to prove who you are," he said. "Start here." Marin nodded sharply and ran. Soon the line formed, hands passing sloshing buckets in a rhythm of desperation. Smoke curled into the sky, thick and dizzying. Flames licked dangerously close to the barn, Elijah's livelihood, the heart of the ranch. Marin sprinted toward the far fence where fire crept through the brush. They grabbed a shovel from their sack, beating back the flames with frantic determination. The sheriff joined them, stamping out sparks with his boots. "Kids got grit," the sheriff muttered. "Always did," Elijah called back. Minutes stretched. The fire roared. Then, as if exhausted by its own fury, the wind shifted, pushing the flames away from the ranch and toward a patch of barren land where it would burn itself out. By the time the last ember died, everyone stood panting, faces blackened with soot. The barn still stood. The house still stood. And so did Marin, exhausted but unbroken. The sheriff approached Marin slowly. "You fought harder than half my men," he admitted. Marin didn't know how to answer. Elijah stepped forward. "Now that you've seen the truth," he told the sheriff, "what happens next?" The sheriff looked at Marin, really looked, without judgment, without the filter of townsfolk gossip. "You're coming back with us," he said, "but not to a cell." Marin tensed. "You'll explain your side properly," the sheriff continued. "We'll set up work for you, real work. You can build that shelter right, with supplies that aren't borrowed. If people give you trouble, they'll answer to me." Marin blinked hard, not from tears but from disbelief. "You do that?" "We all saw who you are today," the sheriff said. "That's worth more than who folks assumed you were." Elijah nodded approvingly. "Truth always shows itself eventually. Sometimes it just needs a fire to burn through the noise." Marin looked at him, voice steady. "Thank you for listening. Come by any time," Elijah said. "You've got a place here when you need one." The posse rode out with Marin at their side, not as a prisoner, but as someone finally seen. Epilogue. Months later, travelers passing the ridge often spotted a small, sturdy shelter built from clean boards and careful hands. Smoke curled from its chimney in the evenings. Sometimes Marin worked outside, hammering new planks or making repairs. The townspeople learned to nod when they passed, some still wary, most quietly respectful. And on certain sunsets, Elijah would ride by, tipping his hat. Marin would lift a hand in return. No drama. No spotlight. Just truth. Just character. And as the sun dipped behind the ridge, the last image was simple, a lone shelter standing strong against the horizon, unpolished, honest, and exactly enough.